Hello, this is Allison Wilhite. And before I get into the concept idea of launch communities, I want to give a really quick um, explanation of why I feel like this is an important service to the community. I worked for a number, about 7 years, with an organization called Safe Families for Children, which places kiddos into a foster care-like situation, but is completely voluntary, and the parents request it when they're in crisis. Through working with this organization, both East Texas and Central Indiana, I noticed quite a few families asking for placement of their kiddos for a couple of months while they stabilized and got their lives back on track after homelessness because they needed to get a job and childcare set up. So the last kiddos that we hosted, my family had about 17 kiddos over about a decade. And this little guy in the red sweater and his little brother stayed with us for about 2 months while their mom slept in a car in a park trying to get out of a toxic family situation. And ultimately, 2 months was a very long time for her kids to be away from her, even with visitation. And it was not near enough time for her to get her life actually in a livable, sustainable state. Ultimately, she was not able to break the cycle and went back to the toxic situation. This just really opened my eyes to the need of um, this population and that the services out there don't mesh well together in order to help single moms. And there's so many gaps that these moms continually fall through.
The focus population for launch communities would be single parents with multiple preschool age kiddos who don't have adequate housing. They may be rebuilding after domestic abuse or reentering after incarceration, but it would not be for those with active addiction. And they must be able to and ready to hold employment. They must have custody of their kiddos and be single parents and interested in homeownership or long-term housing. Many families grow up in a very transient life cycle, and that's what they're used to. But launch communities is specifically for the parents out there who want to put their roots down, want to build stability for their kiddos, and need the extra strategic support to make that happen. The population we're working with here, single parents with multiple young kiddos, is particularly vulnerable for falling through a couple of cracks. First, the housing crack. They don't, as they're taking care of multiple preschool age kiddos, they're usually able to secure temporary housing a little easier with informal situations such as couch surfing, staying with family members for short periods of time, which is better than them being on the street or in the car or in a homeless shelter for their kiddos. And everyone in their circle understands that and helps them, but it also disqualifies them for what this the HUD requirements of homelessness. So they have trouble securing the housing resources available to homeless, even though they really do qualify. The other huge issue is that they can't get they can't pay for housing, they can't pay for a car or transportation if they don't have a job, and they can't pay for childcare. But they can't get a job without childcare. And they, in order to get the CCDF vouchers, which is the government subsidized childcare program, they need to first work a job for 30 days, turn in proof of employment in an application, and then get on the wait list, which can be 4 to 8 weeks, depending on your locations, much longer in some areas. And then they have to also be on a wait list for the childcare facility itself that accepts these CDF vouchers, and not all of them do. So a lot of times this means that parents need to work at a job for 3, 4 months, maybe, before they can actually get funding for their childcare. With one kiddo, sometimes they can swing this with patching together family members and extended family, paying people here and there. But if they have multiple, it becomes nearly impossible for them to do this. Launch model would be combining using one building and combining three elements. You would have family residential units with a mixed income. So either other residential or maybe even business on one site to produce extra income to cover the expenses of the program. And then there would be job placement support and transportation support, coordinated by a social worker or someone who has that skill set for the families that live in the building, and they would do strategic job planning, which we'll get into more, And then the other key element would be on-site childcare specifically for these families that take CCDF vouchers, but can provide free services while the parents are working the program and, and securing employment and then living wage employment. Because launch would use a mixed income building, it would have extra resources to be able to provide very strategic services. First, families that qualified and were accepted would move in with no down payment or first month's rent. They would just sign a contract and move in. They would get weekly case coaching in order to secure a job that will still qualify them for CCDF vouchers. In order to get them, a family of with 2 kids can only make about $14 an hour. So if mom goes and gets a job that's $16 an hour, she's not going to be able to pay for 2 kids in daycare, but she also has just disqualified herself for getting the government vouchers. However, once she's approved for the vouchers, she can make almost double that or substantially more without losing it. So the case coach will help them secure a job that will qualify them for CCF vouchers, help them be able to pay some of their bills, and then switch jobs during their stay here, which would be about 18 months. So then the on-site childcare would close the gap between as soon as when they move in, they have access to the childcare. If they have a doctor appointment or a job interview, they can use the childcare on site. And then as soon as they get a job, their child is enrolled and will attend there until they get moved over to a community-based CCDF accepting childcare facility, which the case coach will work with them on throughout the process. And then another key element here would be that a lot of these parents are young. They have never had a large sum of money. They need help with the saving process that is essential for getting into a high quality residence or putting a mortgage down, having a down payment. So $100, once they start paying, $100 of every month's rent will be put aside in a savings account for them, which will be given to them at the end of their stay. So if they won't be paying the first month, and they start after that paying a lower amount that's reflective of their income, and then it inches up as their income goes up. So that would look like initial, by the time they've been there for 18 months, they're going to have over $1,000, $1,800 to put towards a down payment, or there's resources like their Dream Saver run by La Casa, which will match their contributions 1-4 with government funding in order to get a down payment on a house. So we would strongly encourage and help them access HUD and other home buying resources. And then we'll have resources available for carpooling and job ensuring they get to their places of employment through donated vehicles and carpooling. The other thing would be that we would do financial coaching with them. We would use existing resources for their financial coaching and help them utilize their tax returns to secure a vehicle. If they're well housed and they're not in any dire situation when their tax return comes, and all of them qualify for a large one, given that they have multiple preschool age kiddos and are working, they'll be able to secure transportation with that, with some pre-planning and some support to help them find an honest dealer. Launching these families from unstable to stable will take 2 phases, and the first phase would be about 6 months. So this is a housing first approach. We'll get them into housing, work with them on the cost. Childcare is built in and available for the employment needs. We will have a starter job. Usually they will need to step back into the workforce. Most of them have been out of it for a while or have been in it underemployed. So they'll start out with a starter job and make sure they're qualifying themselves for CCDF vouchers with transportation covered. So we're making this more of a linear process that actually is accomplishable. an important element of launch is that we aren't just trying to stabilize families. We want to get them to the point of thriving. We want them in the community. We want them in community-based childcare and housing. Hopefully, they're able to buy, but at least in long-term housing where they're guaranteed a multiple year lease in a good school district, which is key. And we will be able to help them through the 6 to 18 months of their stay, the phase two. We'll be able to work with them and close gaps as they switch from their starter job to a job that's more a living wage. And that may look like that their kiddos coming back for a period of time to the childcare facility if needed because of the hours being different, or they may be able to switch into community-based childcare first and then switch their job, but they'll have case coaching and support system around them as they make that transition. And then we can help them as they're moving out and connecting them with the resources for long-term housing and making sure it's quality with quality education available to their kids as they hit school age.